So do we have to continuously still hear about Ron and the potential of him being the league MVP? Can that conversation die out already, Mr. Preseason's not real football? This is why you preseason. And it's not all on Ron. Do not get me wrong. I am not saying that what happened with them and the Jets or him and the Jets is 100% on him. But what is very clear is that they are a football team that is confused. They don't know what they want. Their game plan is not structured correctly. Nathaniel Hackett clearly survived off of the fact that he had a strong overall team when he was a coordinator at Green Bay. Could not get it done with the Denver Broncos. That thing was a complete disaster. Defensively, they were phenomenal. Offensively, it looked like they were so out of place. Are we still blaming Russell Wilson for all this? Is anybody not seeing what is going on right now with the Jets? Ron, three interceptions. And missed throws on top of that. Wide open on the final possession of the game. Couldn't connect. The play was there. It's an overall thing. And why you're throwing the football 54 times when you have Breece Hall is beyond me. Nobody's going to sit around and talk to me about this. Ron is done, bro. He is burnt butter. That's all there is to it. He manipulated that entire situation with the Green Bay Packers and the Denver Broncos so that way he could strong-arm his way into a severely decent contract. A contract that, to be honest with you, if I was Green Bay, I wouldn't have paid it. He was running everybody out of town, problem with coaches, problem with trainers, problem with players, problems with everybody. This is verified information. And for some weird reason, Green Bay Packer fan wants to pretend like none of this ever even happened. Oh, so-and-so is this, and so-and-so is that, and you can't believe everything that's in the media. Do you see what's going on right now with the Jets? He manipulated everything. Denver knows damn good and well that the whole thing about getting Nathaniel Hackett was probably talks with Aaron Rodgers. Hey, man, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to follow Hackett. He's my boy. Da-da-da-da-da. Does anybody remember? Oh, Ron, keep my coach out of your mouth even when he wasn't there. You know, he can go on and talk about Travis Kelce and call him Mr. Pfizer and all this BS and do all this stuff that he wants to. The reality is Ron has just turned into a self-imploder. Everything that he has done over the last couple of years has not worked out. Everything that he has done has been to try and just get his own financial gain. He's made himself out to be bigger than he really is. A lot of people bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. You know, last season, before the year began, I said that Ron was about to find out what it's like to be Zach Wilson. He didn't even last 5 plays, and everybody wanted to blame the turf for what happened. How's he doing this year? What happened to he's going to be the MVP? He's the answer the Jets have been looking for. You know what's going to happen now, right? The old coach killer is going to be able to maneuver this thing so that way Robert Saleh can be held 100% at fault. Look, nobody is without problems right now with the Jets. But they won a couple of games, and everybody acted like they were back. Folks, we're just barely into October right now. They weren't back. They were never back. And this is why you preseason. This is literally why you preseason right here. You've got to get your timing down. This is why you practice in the rain. Remember, Robert Saleh said it was his decision to keep old Ron out of the rain. Oh, no, it's my call. Okay, what happened against the Denver Broncos? Denver didn't throw for 100 yards in that football game, and they beat the Jets 10-9 because Butterfingers, bro, you play professional football in the NFL. You got to, after your layoff, you have to get used to the weather. You have to get used to the grip of the ball. You have to get used to taking hits. You have to be used to being live game action. This is not something that happens overnight. Ocho Cinco was all on Shay's podcast. You know, they were on Nightcap. Oh, Ocho Cinco's, I was more impressed with the Jets. I was more impressed with them in that game against the 49ers. Yada, yada, yada. How impressed is everybody with the Jets right now? He's not going to be MVP this season. He's cooked. He's burnt butter. The Jets are done. Forget about it. They can't beat any team of any minor significance whatsoever. And look, I'm not taking anything away from Minnesota because they played great defensively. But if anybody should know the Minnesota Vikings, it should be Aaron. If anybody should know how to beat that football team, and I understand that they're basically a different football team. I get all that. But I think if he would have treated it like he was back in Green Bay, like it was a rivalry game. I mean, come on, man. Does anybody remember that game against the Bears? I still own you. I'm so sick of talking about this dude, man. He's not nearly what he used to be. And let's not forget that there was a time when people legitimately thought that Aaron Rodgers was better than Tom Brady strictly because of the mobility factor. There was a time when Aaron was great. There was a time when he was a phenomenal team player. I don't know what happened. I don't know where it all suddenly went wrong. There was a time, and then it just... So mad about drafting a quarterback. Why? What checks are you writing? Whatever, Broham. College football, obviously a weekend full of upsets, which, by the way, it kind of blows my mind that people aren't talking about Syracuse beating UNLV. I know that UNLV is not a top 15 ranked football team, but they were a top 25 football team. Syracuse was unranked going into that football game, and they beat them. Now, I'll be the first to tell you I didn't think it was going to happen. And Syracuse got up, UNLV came back, took the lead. I was surprised that Syracuse was able to come back and win that football game, but the point is the fact that they're being left out, it tells you just how irrelevant that football team really is. And you're talking to this is a diehard Syracuse fan talking right here. So the irrelevance of that football team is astounding. Seriously. A lot of teams fell. Obviously, the big one, Alabama, Vanderbilt, right? That was the huge one of the week. Look, and we're going to get into this a little bit later on. Top 25, it is what it is. If anybody watched that game, Vanderbilt just looked different. They looked focused. They looked like they were not going to be intimidated strictly off the fact that it's Alabama anymore. And I got to tell you, I think a big part of that had to do with the way the game ended against Georgia the weekend prior. This was a confident Vanderbilt football team, and it was predicated upon coaching. I think the coach looked and said, not only are we not bad anymore, not only are we better than we've ever been at this university, but I am not sold on Bama. I'm not scared of them, and I'm going to get my players to not be scared of them. And I think that's exactly what happened. Look, I've repeated, I don't know how many times over the course of my career, that a team eventually becomes reflective of their coach. And the reality is Caleb DeBoer, when I talked about that again last weekend, to me, got outshined by Kirby Smart. Let's not forget, you go back and you watch that football game, they were down 21-0. And when Kirby Smart's guys were running over the field, hey, keep your head up. Keep your head up. We got this. Stay in this. Keep your head in the game. Hey, we're good. And what happened in the second half? Now, look, I know that Bama ends up winning that football game. And I know Bama fan is going to say, well, it's only one game. It's no big deal. I'm not going to say that it's a big deal in terms of the playoffs, but I am going to say that it is a big deal, number one, mentally. Number two, reflective of coaching. You've got to get out of the shadow of Nick Saban. there were players, including your big guy, Bond, at wide receiver, your best wide receiver at that time, said, I'm leaving because Nick Saban is gone. Now, there were quite a few players who shared that sentiment. And you lose a game like this on a national stage, you're not just competing in recruiting anymore. Now you're competing in the transfer portal. It is a big deal when you start looking at the bigger picture. Because, see, now if you're Alabama, you got to run the gauntlet. You have to win out the rest of your games in the SEC. You're going to have to win the SEC title game. And you're going to have to make a statement in the playoffs. And it's going to be reflective upon coaching. You know, the thing that I talked about last weekend was how you finish a game, to me, is often much more symptomatic than how you start a game. And I said that I was more impressed with Georgia. And look at the way Georgia bounced back on Saturday versus what happened to Alabama, who I think was geeked up on themselves, who I think was overconfident, who I also think may have had a little bit of doubt. Hey, yeah, we won that football game, but how? How did we win it? Miracle plays. Look, that Ryan Williams kid has the world in front of him. Made another great play against Vandy. He's got everything in front of him. But I've said from the beginning that I'm not really sure that Jalen Milroe gets you to where you want to go. I don't think the game planning is there. I don't think the coaching is there. I think there's a good possibility this team finishes 9-3 this season. Now, if that's going to be good enough to get them into the playoffs, who the hell really knows? Because even though the SEC champion is going to automatically get in, obviously, and they're going to get the bye probably, after that, you still have to get invited in. And where you're seated and where you're ranked is going to be a big deal because let's not forget, the first round is going to get home games. Do you really want to go on the road right now? Look, the other thing is teams around the conference watch that football game. You saw the reactions, right? There were videos all over ESPN of other players that were watching this go down going, Bama just lost to Vanderbilt? Are you for real right now? I don't want to say the sky is falling. I don't want to say it's the beginning of the end. But what I will say is this. They are taking notes. And they are figuring out what the formula is. Now, if I'm watching Bama play the last couple of games, I'm figuring out the formula to stopping them is Ryan Williams, number one. There's not a lot you could do with it because even when he's double covered, he's still making plays. So what do? High, low. That's number one. Number two, instead of using linebackers to spy Milroe, I'm spying with my defensive ends. And I'm mixing it up. And really my front four in general. I would take a different guy every time, predicated upon the look that Bama shows me, and I'm dropping maybe my defensive end and what looks like in the coverage. Really, he's playing the quarterback. And I am disguising that as much as I can, and I'm utilizing it probably to 45 to 55% of all of my play calls on the defensive side. If he gets out, every once in a while, no big deal. But as long as we mainly get stops, it's not going to be an issue. The other thing that I want to do is offensively, I want to run the football. And I want to run the football on the outside. And then I want over the middle throws, 10 yards, in. It's money every time. And then eventually you're going to be able to use the outside. Look, I'm not going to take away anything from Vanderbilt because they've accomplished something amazing. But again, if you look at that game, they outcoached Bama in every sense of the word. It's not that Bama still didn't have chances to win that football game down at the end. They got outcoached. They got out-hustled. That's all there is to it. Again, a team eventually becomes reflective of who they are. Look how it ended for Washington in the college football championship. I am telling you. The other question is, depending on how this season goes, and this is the last thing I want to go with this, is when you think about it, how long do you give Kalen DeBoer? He's been gift-wrapped the best program in college football. Now, I'm not saying the transfer portal is not making things difficult, but it certainly can, which that's my next thing. Look, this is, again, why I hate preseason polls. This is why I hate polls before week number 8. We've already seen Notre Dame get beat by Northern Illinois. We've already seen Florida State. What are they? I mean, come on. This season has been a disaster from the word go. Georgia Tech was ranked predicated upon that win, and then they lost to Syracuse, who, by the way, did not get ranked. They ended up losing. Syracuse did. Didn't look great for the most part against Holy Cross. Then Syracuse ends up figuring out a way to beat UNLV. Hell, by 2 weeks ago, 10 teams that had been either ranked in the preseason or after the first initial rankings came out after the first week already lost a game, and 5 of them had already dropped all the way out of the top 25. And look what happened this last weekend. When you look at what's going on with the transfer portal right now, it is making it much more complicated to figure out who the good teams really are. This is not even 7 years ago. I mean, I like to point out 1980s, 1990s, hell, back 1970s. This is not even 5 or 7 years ago where you were sitting around and you were sitting on top of 4 and 5 star recruits who were just waiting to get their opportunity, who you were redshirting as freshmen, they were coming in as sophomores, and then as juniors and seniors, they were dominating. You're not seeing that anymore. What you are seeing is what we initially saw with the scholarships, right? So when they went from 100 to 75, it took a little bit longer for the playing field to even out. But we started to see it, obviously, with teams like Utah, Boise State, a couple of others, right? Rutgers had some really good football teams, despite what anybody wants to talk about. In fact, the Big East was still doing pretty good against teams in the BCS for the most part. But the point of what I'm saying is we started to see that all level out, right? Well, then it changed again. And the teams that were really prolific and the coaches that were phenomenal at recruiting ended up rising to the top, right? It's not like that anymore. Now you have these kids going anywhere and everywhere for starting jobs, NIL money. Sure, you have the players like Genty, who reportedly turned down a lot of money so that way he could stay at Boise State. They're going to be there regardless. They're not worried about, what coach is coming or going or any of that stuff. They just, really want to play football. They're content where they're at. They like their campus life. They enjoy the classes, whatever the case may be. That's just who they are. There's nothing wrong with that. What I am saying is the way that the playing field has already leveled out, it is a dramatic difference. This isn't something that is taking years and years and years before we start seeing the change. And especially with NIL money getting involved, you've got people like Coach Prime and a host of others that actually get the market. They understand what's going on. They embrace social media. They love how their kids are making money. They support them making money. They understand how to get them to still how to play football, even though some of these athletes could potentially be making more money than them now, versus a Brian Kelly who's scared to death of the whole damn thing, versus Alabama and Nick Saban going, I can't do this anymore. Let's not forget that Nick Saban flat out said a season ago, hey, look, I benched Milroe, and I did it for this reason, and the reason is that I like to keep my guys a little paranoid. I like them to play with paranoia. You can't. I guarantee you that didn't work out well for Saban, because not only did Milroe end up starting again rapidly, but Nick Saban has said over and over again, this just isn't the college football that I know. In other words, Milroe probably went to him and said, hey, bro, if you don't want me here, man, I can leave. No big deal. December, I'm outie. I guarantee you something like this, what's going on in college football right now, felt like a blow, a knockout blow to Nick Saban. He never for any moment thought that it would come to this. Talked about the celebration of the players. He's not able to embrace what college football is right now. And what's going to happen is you're going to see much younger coaches coming up. I'm talking guys in their mid-30s. Fran Browns, Sharon Moores. These guys are younger. They're closer to the youth. They get what's going on. They understand the vibe. They know what's happening. And they're going to embrace it. And they are going to pass everybody by. They're going to be okay with the transfer portal, even when it hurts them. But because they love those things and because they embrace those things, what is going to happen is you are going to see those universities have less problems with the transfer portal. And what's really going to happen, even bigger, is those universities are also going to be much more successful in the transfer portal. Now, I don't know who the hell it's going to be right now. There was a time when I thought it was going to be Coach Prime, because who the hell gets money like he does? Who the hell gets social media like he does? Who embraces the culture of the youth right now the way that he does? But unfortunately, the more I look at it, the more I think, man, he's probably going to be gone at the end of this season. Now, it is what it is. But somebody is going to. Somebody is going to come up that is going to have all this on lock. They're going to love it. They're going to appreciate it. They're not going to be jealous of it. They're not going to say, well, when I played. They're not going to do any of that. I mean, come on, man. You've already got Greg Olsen, who's a tight end at Miami, playing the NFL. Everybody knows who he is. He had that damn rap song that ended up surfacing out of the middle of nowhere. And what was he talking about? The social media stuff. It's all about having the clout, the best barbershop, the this, the that. Bro, you literally went to Miami, a team that was exclusively about clout. Do you understand what city you played in? It's like everybody forgets what it's like to be 21. But somebody is going to come in and go, oh, no, hell, man, I remember when I was your age. Hell, if I was 21, I'd be making money while I'm doing this too. You know, just try to remember your studies. You're still here for that purpose. I want to see you do really good once you get out of here. Because there's no guarantees about the NFL. There's no guarantees you're never going to get hurt. None of that stuff. But while you're here, let's make you some money. Oh, you're going to be on social media? All right, that's cool. Hey, just kind of mind what you do. All right, don't get crazy. Just kind of mind what you do. Those coaches are going to be engaging on their social media. They're going to be sharing their social media while simultaneously backing out a little bit, understanding it's still a coach relationship. I don't know who next in line is, but they're going to figure it out. And whoever does that will probably be the most successful coach of this era. Because you really, how much more can you change in terms of the money other than maybe revenue sharing? And I know that people continue with this whole thing, oh, it's the wild, wild west, and it's this, and it's that, and yada, yada, yada. Look, you need to stop it. It's all just new, but what you don't understand is that in 1985, if the lid would have been ripped off of college football and college athletics in general, you would have seen how wild the West really was. To me, this is probably a very toned down with the transfer portal and the NIL money and all that stuff. It's very toned down to me. I really look at this and I go, if somebody fainted, go back and rewatch the Pony Excess. If somebody fainted because of the announcement that they had to make, how crazy do you think things were back then? That wasn't an easy move to do. That means that's how literally crazy things had got at that point. And you mean to tell me you think that this is something? This is literally nothing compared to what we are used to seeing in college football. You're just not used to seeing it so out in the open. And that's okay. But somebody's going to come along that full on embraces it and goes, look, man, here's the deal. And they're going to run with it. I don't think it's Caleb DeBoer. I'll tell you that much. Look, you got to understand that a lot of these coaches, they're okay with the transfer portal and they're okay with the NIL, but they're not really in love with it. And they're not fully embracing the social media era. They're not fully embracing any of that stuff. They can't stand it. They can't get out of their own heads and out of their own old way of thinking. You have to think forward. You can't keep being so small-minded. It's just all there is to it. Dabo Swinney is doing everything that he can to prove that you don't have to do any of this. We'll see how it plays out in the ACC this year. And really for the next 4 or 5 years. There's a war going on right now. And I know somebody's going to point out, well, look at Army, look at Navy. Bro, look at the teams they've beat. Okay? Let's stop. Because I don't, even if one of them should happen to make it to the CFP, lose by 40, bro. And that would be being nice. Okay? Which really, to be honest with you, that leads me to my next thing. The CFP still needs an overhaul. I cannot stand the idea that a Power 4 team, whoever's the highest ranked, they're going to get these buys and all that. I can't stand it. I just cannot stand it. It needs an overhaul. In fact, I've been saying for years that all playoff systems need a complete overhaul. I am talking pros all the way down to the Pee-wee level, man. For the most part. You see what I'm saying here? Look, the NFL, I don't like the AFC versus NFC. It's an outdated way of doing things. It all started when, you had the AFL, you had the NFL, and they got together and they had what was called a Super Bowl, and then you had AFC, and then you create the NFC, and you mark your teams here and you mark your teams there, and they've realigned a couple of times and they've added, and stop it. Just stop. It shouldn't be a thing anymore. Really, to me, honestly, shouldn't have been a thing since probably the 80s. Look, winning a Super Bowl to me is not necessarily predicated upon the success of your conference. I don't mind keeping the conferences, and I don't mind keeping the divisions. But at the end of the day, the conferences really serve no purpose other than having a shield that you can make money on at this point. The divisions are one thing, but I don't think a division champion should automatically get into the playoffs either. Why do we have football teams in the NFL, what is supposed to be the highest level of sport, in the highest level in said sport, have teams with losing records in the playoffs? It does not begin to make any sense to me whatsoever. What a division champion should be used for is a tiebreaker. That's it. You got two teams with similar records. You've got all this stuff in place. Hey, this is how it works. This is what we have. We're just going to use the division winner as a tiebreaker, but you should have to have a winning record. And especially now with having 17 games, it's not complicated anymore. You either have a losing record or you have a winning record. But I do not agree with the idea that a division winner should get an automatic bid to the playoffs. That doesn't make any sense. Same thing in the NBA. Why are we still doing East versus West? That doesn't make any sense. Again, it's just a shield to help make money. What would you do? Well, it's very simple. If I ran the NFL, I would get away with the conferences. I would do away with those shields. I would have nothing but divisions. I would keep the divisions the way that they are now. Hell, you might even realign again, to be honest with you. But I would keep the divisions, use the division winner as essentially a tiebreaker, with the caveat of you must have a winning or better record. And then in addition, I would get away with AFC and NFC for the playoffs. I wouldn't have 14 teams. I would have 12 teams. But if you want 14, because, there's over 30 now in the NFL, that's fine. And you take the best 14 teams and you seed them out and you go from there. That's a true playoff. I mean, come on, when you think about it, why are we still calling it a wild card? It doesn't make sense. It used to be 2 teams would get the first round bye and the other 4 teams were in the wild card. That somewhat made sense. Now you get 1 team from each conference, they get a bye, and everybody else is a wild card? Come on, man. Just stop it. It's just the playoffs. Again, a name to throw a shield on to make money. The money's going to be there. The revenue's going to be there. Everybody's going to generate it. The billions of dollars that the NFL is collecting right now just from media revenue alone, they're fine. NBA is the same way. Get away with East versus West. If you want 16 teams in the playoffs, fine. I think that's too many, but it is what it is. And you go, okay, fine. We're just going to tournament this thing out. The best 16 teams are going to get in because you have teams that are getting over teams that have a losing record strictly because of the conference that they are in. It doesn't make sense. And again, you use division winner. And by the way, I'd get rid of that stupid ass in-season tournament thing. That's so stupid. That cup, that's just, it's pointless. And it forced the Lakers to hang a banner that didn't matter. They only hung championships. They didn't hang division championships. They didn't hang conference championships. They only hung NBA championships. Now they're putting a banner up for a cup. Make that make sense. No, I'm just not with it. NHL, same way. MLB, same way. Well, how do we prove who's the best conference? You have an all-star game if you want to keep conferences. Because the conference that has the best players, understand, if a conference has the best players, that does not necessarily translate to having the best teams. Look at John Elway and the Denver Broncos as a perfect example in the 80s. Denver probably had the best quarterback in the NFL. And I know somebody's going to go, Joe Montana, are you serious? I said what I said. They probably had the best quarterback on the NFL on one of the worst teams in the NFL. And he dragged mediocre football teams and a coach who didn't know what he was doing to 3 Super Bowls where he got dominated by the best teams. He actually threw for more yards than Phil Simms in that Super Bowl. Did you know that? Threw for more yards. Dan Reeves should have called timeout instead of letting him execute that fake punt, which completely changed the game. How many field goals did Denver miss in that game? Offensive line couldn't protect for jack. Elway's back there running around all over the place. Go back. Rewatch the game. Rewatch the game. Not highlights. Not a 25-minute reel put up by NFL Films. The entire game. Poor play calling down on the 1-yard line. Happened again in the second Super Bowl. Happened again against the Super Bowl against the Niners. How many Hall of Famers did John Elway compete against on one football team? And even then, they weren't always stacked with Hall of Famers. They had really great coaches. They had really great role players. They understood what they were doing. You go back and you look at that Giants football team that Denver played against. I mean, who were Hall of Famers on that team other than what? Lawrence Taylor. I think Carson was one on defense, right? Phil Simms on offense. Against Washington, you got a Hall of Fame coach in Joe Gibbs, obviously. Same thing with the Giants. Obviously, Hall of Fame coach in Bill Parcells. You play against the 49ers. Now, that team was riddled. You got Joe Montana, John Taylor, Jerry Rice. Steve Young was a backup on that football team, if that tells you anything. I think Bill Romanowski was on defense on that football team. Didn't have Ricky Waters, Tom Rathman, if I remember correctly. I mean, come on, man. That deck was stacked. And I don't know, as good as Elway was, if Denver would have gone to those Super Bowls had the playoffs been the way that they were. And I don't know that we would have seen the dominance of Tom Brady. Now, granted, once he was there, he was there. But I don't know that we would have seen the overall dominance of Tom Brady and the Patriots the way that we did. I think eventually John Elway would have got us Super Bowls. I think eventually Tom Brady would have won a few Super Bowls, but I don't know that we would have seen it the way that we did if we had just made the playing field the way that it's supposed to be. The idea of a conference dominating over another conference is an outdated thing, especially with free agency and all that stuff the way that it is now. I mean, come on. Look at what just happened with Saquon Barkley and the Giants. I mean, they literally put out a video. They thought this was a good idea of them sitting around and going, well, you know, I just don't feel like we're paying Daniel Jones to hand the ball off. Well, buddy, you probably shouldn't have paid him what you did then. That's real simple. Let him go. Let him look, man. Let him test the market. You know who the definitive factor on that football team is. There's no way you didn't understand that your best player was Saquon Barkley. I, for one, think that because of free agency and the way that these teams interchange all the time, to have conferences and try to say that such and such is a dominant conference, it doesn't make sense anymore to me. Now, I know somebody's going to go and they're going to point out Patrick Mahomes and all that good stuff, and that's fine. But again, if he had to go against other NFC teams, would we be seeing the Chiefs in the same situation that they are now with their Super Bowls? And it is a valid question, and it is logical to ask it. I'm not saying Mahomes isn't the best quarterback in the NFL, because he is. But you look at the problems the Kansas City Chiefs have had. Drop passes, even Mahomes, especially this year, has missed some throws. If we were to just take the best 14 teams and put them in the playoffs, do you really think the Chiefs would end up getting there? I don't think we would see very many dynasties, if I'm being honest with you. Because I think it would just get too hard to win. With the college football playoff, you need to understand that you need to come up with a system that isn't about ranking, where we're not voting. I'm tired of business decisions being made in football. We need to be making football decisions, not business choices. That's the issue. We're making business decisions. It's a beauty pageant. Who looks the prettiest? Who's going to make us the most money? Who's the sexiest out there? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to see. I want to see Bama. No, man. Fuck that. You know what I want to see? The best teams. That's what I want to see. And here's the problem. They made that rule about the conference champions, but then they left out Florida State, who was an undefeated football team. Look what happened to Georgia. Bro, Georgia beat Florida State's practice squad. Stop it. Look at Florida State this season. This season is different from last season. It's a completely different football team. You are missing the point. You're so ingrained. You are letting the system win. You are letting them convince you of what should be, so that way they can continue to do whatever they want to do by manipulating you the way that they did for years in the NCAA to maximize their earning potential. You allowed them to manipulate you into thinking that all these athletes were going to college to play sports, and it was because of this immaculate free education that they were going to get. Wrong. You were snowballed, and you're being snowballed again. Because they don't want to lose the ratings. They don't want to lose their viewership. They're scared of losing their sponsors. They are making business decisions, not football choices. And Kirk Herbstreit can kiss it because he knows he's using his power of influence. ESPN knows they are. Folks, why do you think they rely on the AP poll instead of the coaches poll now? Oh, well, the coaches, they don't have the burden of having to vote anymore and having, their connections and their bias. Really? You think people that are journalists don't have bias? And by the way, the AP poll never knows what they're doing. It's the same AP poll that had Florida State rate number 10 at the beginning of this season. Where are they now? The college football playoff is not a true playoff. It is an invitational. You are invited to come to this playoff. And we will decide how good you are by putting a number in front of you. The only teams that aren't invited are the conference winners of the Power Four conference. And then from there, the highest rated or ranked. But it's really rated. I'm rating you this. I'm beautifying you this way. Out of a 10, Shorty's a 7. Out of Power Conference, which, by the way, final thing here, the Power Conference idea needs to go away. What I unfortunately see happening is probably 2 just mega conferences, invite only, and then you have everybody else, right? Which, within the 2 mega conferences, you'll probably have anywhere between 45 and 50 teams, and that'll be it. And it'll be all exclusivity, and you're probably down to a north and a south because you look at the Big 12, how are they still around? I can't believe they haven't dissolved. The PAC is doing everything that they can. The NCAA has already informed them that right off the rip, they are still not going to be granted an automatic to the college football playoffs. So they're being told that they are no longer a power conference, even if they're able to figure out a way to survive for the year 2026. The real situation here is, again, it's all invitational. That's what it amounts to. It's a beauty pageant. We're rating. We're giving you a ranking. That's what we're predicating everything on. Make that make sense. This loss that Alabama has from Vanderbilt could potentially hurt them if they don't win the SEC. How stupid is that? For years, you had these football teams that were 11-1, 10-2. They were solid football teams, and they were left out. And it's still going to be the exact same story. Just wait. There's going to be some drama. Maybe not this season, but in the years to come, there will be some drama at the end of the year. There are going to be teams that are very deserving that are going to get left out. That's the reality of the situation, and they thrive on it. It creates so much attention to what they are doing. What they don't understand is that the more that this happens, the more there is a disconnect in their audience. So you SEC fans might think that you run the world and your conference runs the world and all that good stuff, but I got news for you. Eventually, the other 90% will get pissed off and go, I'm out. It's all there is to it. I mean, come on, you've already got SEC fans talking about claiming OUs and Texas's championships. Stop. The point of what I'm saying is they have done their job. They have maneuvered themselves and positioned themselves perfectly. Now with the NIL, you have figured out that it is not about college education because it hasn't been for years. I hate to break it to everybody. It hasn't been. And really, you need to be honest with yourself. When you watch college football, you are not thinking about your star quarterback and how he's doing in physics class. You're thinking about, damn, man, why'd he throw that second interception? Or, woo, 4 TDs, baby. We're going all the way. We got our guy. That's what you're thinking about. Stop it. All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. The show is Underground Sports. We are live. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. Wherever you're listening to podcasts, take a device to play Underground Sports by Drew Duncan. You can Google Underground Sports by Drew Duncan. I am on the HHN TV, a.k.a. the Hip Hop Network. Simply download the app on any smart device, Droid, iPad, iPhone, wherever you are, they are. And, of course, I am on WBFR Block 50 Radio at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Monday and Friday in the morning. Block50radio.com is up live 24/7, 365. In the meantime, your local programming is next. Don't you dare touch that dial.